Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's capacity building session. We will be starting in around 1 or 2 minutes, just waiting for everyone to trickle in. But thank you so much for taking the time to join. Please feel free to turn your cameras on, introduce yourselves in the chat. Everything is more than welcome. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll get started now. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you might be in the world. My name is Aryan Singrachka. I am the GCM lead and global focal point of the Migration Youth and Children platform, the platform by youth for youth to impact the highest levels of international migration policymaking. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever GCM capacity building series focused today on empowering African youth for the Global Compact. Today's session would not be possible without the contribution of our donors and our supporting partners, IOM, the UN Network on Migration, and the Young Go Migration Working Group. Today's session is your session to really learn more about the GCM and how it relates to Africa and how you can take action to implement the 23 objectives in amongst your local communities and networks. We have an exciting lineup of speakers for you to engage with, so please have your questions ready for them to put in the chat. And in the breakout sessions after our expert panel, we want to hear your perspectives on the challenges that young migrants face and across the continent, from climate mobility to human trafficking. What you share with us here today will then be collated and brought to the upcoming regional review in Addis Ababa next month. Young people are an essential part of the GCM process, how it relates to Africa, and how you can take action to implement the 23 objectives. With over 1/3 of international migrants being under the age of 30 globally. MYCP is striving to ensure youth voices are heard at all levels of decision-making in the run-up to the next International Migration Review Forum. Before we begin, a slight bit of housekeeping. The host language for this session is in English, unfortunately with no live translation. However, closed captions are enabled for those who need it. Also, there will be a French-speaking breakout session for those more comfortable conversing in French rather than English to share your thoughts and opinions. And all breakout rooms are the same, discussing the same questions, so you are free to join whichever one you feel most comfortable. And finally, we'll be discussing some sensitive issues, so please be respectful of everyone's opinion. And I am the session's designated safeguarding lead, so should you need anything, please do contact me via the chat. Now on to our first speaker. I'm very happy to introduce Monami Molik, the Civil Society Liaison of the UN Network for Migration, to give us an overview about what the GCM is, its history, and the role of the network in its process. Monami, over to you.
Thank you very much, Aryan, and thank you to all of the participants who've joined. Your network is absolutely a longtime partner of the UN Network on Migration and in the work of the Global Compact for Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration, pretty much since the beginning of the process several years ago. I'm happy to share just for a few minutes here with you a bit of a background and the overall roadmap that you can expect in terms of participating and engaging with the follow-up and review of the Global Compact that is taking place this year across different regions, and specifically in about 1 month from now for the African region in Addis Ababa. So I'm going to share my screen and just walk us through a short presentation. Can you see that okay? Okay, wonderful. Let's see. Okay. So what is the GCM Regional Review? As you already likely know, the Global Compact for Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration was adopted back in 2018 at the Marrakesh conference. Since then, the way the GCM is structured, it requires an follow-up and review at the global level every 4 years, and that is interspersed with review and follow-up at each regional level. So the last International Migration Review Forum was held in 2022 in New York. And 2 years later, now we're having the second cycle of regional reviews of the GCM, which will now then be followed by the International Migration Review Forum again in 2026. The International Migration Review Forum itself is concluded with a progress declaration that lays out a global agenda for some of the top priorities on migration governance. And that really drives the work plan in regional level, in country level for the next 4 years. So the regional reviews are important in that they feed directly into what gets developed as priorities globally and in every region to do the day-to-day work on implementing migration policies and policies that are aligned with the Global Compact. So the regional process, as it applies for civil society organizations and networks like yours and other stakeholders, is that we've been trying to do things very early based on feedback that we've gotten from many of you. And so we had pre-consultations for the Africa region back in July 30th. I think several of you were part of that consultation. Following those, each region sets up various thematic consultations. For the Africa region, we already just concluded those 2 thematic consultations this week on Monday and Tuesday. Now, the participation of civil society is a very core component of the GCM. In paragraph 44, it defines what it identifies as stakeholders, and the GCM has really expanded the world of actors, of non-state actors, beyond civil society, including civil society, but to migrants themselves, diaspora organizations, local authorities, mayors, the private sector, trade unions, parliamentarians, academia, national human rights institutes, and others, as you see here. And the network, in the work that we do, engages all of these stakeholders to different degrees at the global level, at the regional level, and more and more at the country level, and particularly in Africa, more and more at the country level. And that's through our work streams, that's through countries where the network, in partnership with the government and national coordination mechanisms, are developing national implementation plans on the GCM. And that's significant for the Africa region because there are 4 countries already that are either concluded or beginning the process of creating national implementation plans on GCM, and that's Malawi, Ghana, Kenya, and Sierra Leone. And in these countries, stakeholders from the national, the countrywide level are part of that process. They have a platform and they're giving regular inputs into actually shaping the implementation plan aligned to national policy frameworks on migration. So back to the regional review process. This is, again, the outline of the steps in the African region. The series of consultations online have taken place. They also included sub-regional consultations for West and Central Africa. And on the 8th of October in Addis Ababa, there will be an in-person multi-stakeholder full-day consultation. And that is followed by the 9th and 10th of October, which will be the intergovernmental regional review meeting. Now, stakeholders are invited to attend. Registrations were open for a period of time and closed on the 3rd of September. We have a very large number of registrations that came in from civil society and stakeholders around the continent. And I think people should be notified very soon of the approval of registrations. Stakeholders will be physically present in all of the meetings, in the stakeholder consultation, as well as in the 2-day intergovernmental meeting, and will be speaking on panels across the 3 days as well. There was also an open call to see if stakeholders wish to serve as the rapporteur, who would carry the key recommendations from all of these consultations into government meeting. And we got a lot of requests for that as well. And pretty soon we'll reach out with notifying and letting you know who the rapporteur is. And that person, I hope that your network will work closely with that rapporteur for Africa to make sure that the youth recommendations, the recommendations you carry for the region, are included and part of the overall stakeholder summary report for the review. And that summary report feeds into the outcome report for the Africa Review. And many of these consultations were not just about civil society talking to themselves, but they were directly talking to the pen holders of those who are drafting the roundtable discussions and eventually what will go into the outcome report and recommendations for the Africa Review on migration and the GCM. And so their entry points are several. Besides the online consultations that happened, I think what's still available is that we welcome you to submit any shadow reports, policy briefs that you may have. And these are usually put on the website for the Africa Regional Review itself. And unless somebody else has already done that, I'll put the website for the Africa Review in the chat box. And I'll just skip over, I think a lot of this was already said, so I'll end it there. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Monami, for that really interesting presentation. And I hope everyone here can get involved in some way with the regional review process, especially those in Africa. And for diaspora members based in Latin America, Asia Pacific, there are upcoming regional reviews later next year as well in your respective regions, and you can take part of both. But thank you so much, Monami. Next on the agenda, we will turn to our expert panel, led by Nelson, who was our regional project lead for Africa, to moderate, along with Sophia from IOM and Paddy from the Africa Non-State Actors Platform for the GCM. So Nelson, Paddy, Sophia, over to you.
Thank you, Aryan. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to see everybody here. My name is Nelson Chege. I'm the African Region Project Lead for the GCM at MYCP, and I'll be a moderator for this session. So to build up on Monami's very informative presentation, we will have two speakers from the African region who will give some brief interventions around the theme of connecting Africa to the world in the context of the GCM. After they speak, we will have a Q&A. So I invite everybody to, as they give their presentations, you can also be putting in your comments and thoughts and questions on the chat box. So our first speaker is Sophia Aitenu from the IOM Africa Special Liaison Office. So Sophia, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Sophia Itano. I'm with the IOM office based here in Addis, that is the accredited office to the African Union Commission, as well as the UNECA. It's good to virtually meet everyone. Chair, if you allow me, let me put off my my video. The network bandwidth is a bit tricky, so I want everyone to hear my message. So let me just put my video off with your permission. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for the organizers and for inviting IOM to say a few words on the GCM and how better to connect Africa with the world. So allow me first to just say, I'm sure most of you here, one way or the other, have been working on the GCM. As we all know, the GCM is the first intergovernmental agreement aimed at creating a comprehensive framework for International Cooperation on Migration. It was adopted in December 2018 with 23 objectives to basically improve migration management and ensure safe, orderly, and regular migration. The GCM emphasizes a human rights-based approach with a commitment to addressing drivers of migration, including economic as well as environmental factors. So when we see Africa's role in the GCM, Africa is a key player in global migration trends, both as a continent of origin, transit, as well as destination for migrants. I'm sure because most of our worldview is shaped by the media, we normally have a tendency to consider Africa as only continent of origin, but in reality and according to different studies conducted, close to 80 to 85% of migration actually happens within the Africa continent. But as I said, we only hear often about the movement that goes out of the continent. So African countries, can leverage the GCM to address migration challenges like irregular migration, trafficking, and as an alternative can be promoting legal pathways for mobility. The economic and development opportunities. As you might know, the GCM highlights the positive contributions of migrants to host communities and promotes diaspora engagement. For the Africa continent, connecting with the global economy through the GCM, one way is enhancing remittance flows, knowledge transfer, and skills development, basically contributing to the continent's economic growth. This can be achieved, facilitating mobility, especially through regional integration efforts being led by the African Union Commission in collaboration with its 8 regional economic communities. This can help create legal pathways for labor migration and trade, basically connecting Africa to the global markets. The other aspect that we've looked at is climate migration and resilience. As you all know, Africa is one of the regions most vulnerable to climate change, which drives displacement and forced migration. The GCM promotes addressing climate-induced migration by building resilience, reducing risks, and facilitating safe mobility. As such, African countries can use this GCM framework to access further international support, also contribute to the whole climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, as well as helping communities adapt and remain resilient. The other aspect is advancing human rights and protection. The GCM aims to safeguard the rights of migrants with a special focus on vulnerable groups such as including women, children, and those displaced by conflict or environmental factors. The GCM encourages nations to strengthen legal frameworks and protection mechanisms for migrants, including access to justice and essential services. So collaboration between African governments and international organizations working on this area. Through that, there's a possibility to ensure that migration policies prioritize human dignity and safety. The last point is enhancing regional and global cooperation. The GCM encourages regional partnerships. As such, initiatives from the African Union side on migration issues will enhance and create more cohesive policies that align with global goals. So the Africa continent can benefit from multilateral platforms to negotiate better terms for its migrant population outside the continent, ensuring their rights and contributions are properly recognized on a global stage. So these are some of the areas that we've highlighted in terms of migration the GCM serving as a bridge, basically connecting Africa to the global community through responsible migration governance. Let me leave it at that, and then we can come back for the discussions later. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nelson.
Thank you so much, Sophia. That was really informative, especially on how African countries can leverage the GCM process. So we'll move on to our second speaker, that's Paddy Fianga. But before I bring in Paddy, I will want to remind everyone that you can ask any question, comments, anything on the chat box, and then after Paddy speaks, we'll go through the questions and they'll respond to you. So Paddy Fianga is from the African Non-State Actors Platform for the GCM, and I know she has a lot to tell us. You're welcome, Paddy.
Nelson, thank you. I don't know, can you hear me? I have a bit of background noise, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, you're good.
Being in a room with young people, I feel that I'm always just energized. I was just saying as we were in the waiting room that it's very energizing to be around young people. And I think particularly today, when your focus is on Africa, of course, we all know this is the youngest continent. And also knowing that, you know, the vibrancy that is within the African youth, and to really talk about different issues as they affect the youth, but also as they affect societies and in preparing for the future generation. So I thought, you know, when Josefina and your colleagues said, you know, what should we really talk about in the context of your capacity building today in terms of empowering African youth for the GCM? Well, the GCM has been well explained. I thought about doing something around where did it start, you know, where it started with African engagement. And here I will zone in also on talking a little bit about African states and the role that they have played. I think what is very critical is that many people, civil society, particularly non-state actors and the diversity of it, have been pushing for centering a discussion around development connected to migration. And you can go back to all the way to 2005. So before we talk about the GCM, which was only born after 2018, we can really see that there's been an agency around African non-state actors to engage in the discourse around migration governance, that it's not just related to migration, but that you bring it closer to what sustainable development has to do with migration and vice versa. And so diaspora inputs, global South perspectives, you know, issues around forced displacement, you see them sort of featuring in many aspects around, and also high-level debates that we've had in the political sense, but you saw it as a first prominent feature. So before you had high-level forums, and I would encourage you to read the World Migration Report, I think both of 2020 and 2024 have two specific chapters that try to go a little bit back and say, how did we come to global migration governance at this global level before we dealt things national level? In Africa, we have the sub-regional and we even have the continental, but then we went global. Where does it really come from? So I think those two documents, which are actually IOM publications, are very interesting for you to look at. So that's sort of where it started. But then it landed in Morocco with the GCM, and that was in 2018, around about the time that MYCP was born. And there, I think this was very important. And some would say, well, why was it important? You know, this thing it's not even binding. You know, member states came, they showed up to Morocco, but it's not binding. But we're saying that it is very important because it was the first time ever that governments around the world, within the forum of the UN, decided to do something about having safe, orderly, and regular migration. And that's really important, particularly also for young people. And so you saw civil society inputs coming in different ways and formats as the life of the GCM has taken shape since 2018, whether it was at the IMRF, at national level, at sub-regional level, and also at continental level. So really civil society inputs have been pushing the GCM even before it was born. But how is it going? And I think how it's going is that we can look a little bit around the champion countries. And why are these important? I think the latest champion country, Monami, please correct me, is Sierra Leone, added to this list. And I'm focusing on Africa: Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, Senegal, and Sierra Leone, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe there are a few others that I've missed. Why are these important for us to focus as young people? Because this is where we live. We live in champion countries. It's a reality for us. And so these are just the African ones. But for instance, I'm a member of the African diaspora, Zambian diaspora living in Germany. I'm very keen to see what Germany is doing around the GCM because it's signed up to it and it's actually also trying to push for this. So champion countries are a space and an entry point for young people to really try and sort of nudge a bit and say, yes, you signed on this, but you're also a champion countries. What are really your championing moments? So that brings me to championing moments. And championing moments for us in the civil society or non-state actor space is very important because it's not all about the champion countries, right? And so where do we see that? And we see championing moments and initiatives with the youth. I think the third forum that you had on migration was really a championing moment of saying, we just don't want to be invited to panels. We just don't want to hang around, older people talking about what they see as an old problem. We want to talk about migration as it faces us today and as it's going to face the future and how development is very important to bring into the fold. So that's why it's important and that's how it's going. But there's a lot that we can do, I think, in terms of civil society mobilization. We're trying to do this with the African Non-State Actors Platform by focusing on two key processes, the GCM and the GFMD. We believe the GFMD is all about dialogue, where we talk and we can talk about all those problems. It's a bit like the elders sitting around and not really having a budget around what they should be doing. And there comes the GCM, where we see this is where the action should take place. And there's a lot of things in between that. There's regional consultative processes in all the areas that MYCP colleagues within Africa and those who are working with African countries, I'm also speaking to those in the diaspora, engage with. How can you engage regional consultative processes as young people as well to leverage and say, hey, the GCM came along, what's your role? And that's an important entry point. But also civil society also has a very specific role in coining very clearly what we need to do. So I'll end with a couple of things on what we need to do. Now, when we met as the African Non-State Actors Platform, which is trade unions, diaspora, and civil society actors, we met in Abuja last year and we said, okay, we'll look at GFMD, we'll look at GCM, but what about them? And we can't go running around roundtables and thematic areas as they are formed. Let's be clear on what we want to focus on: labor migration, climate mobility, diaspora. So we picked these two, and having culture narratives and rights and all these other things as more or less cross-cutting, but looking at women and youth as being instrumental as well because they fall under these. So in what we call the Abuja Declaration, and I will post it in the link in a bit, you will see how we tried in one way or another, which I think we could still do a bit much more. How do we have the strong force of the youth to bring out their voice on thematic issues, climate mobility, what's happening around labor migration partnerships? We're talking about young people's jobs and vocational training. So it's important that we have young people voices, so young people from the diaspora and civil society. We're talking about second generation diaspora as well, and the impact and the way they want to engage differently with countries of origin, destination, and transit. And what are their dreams and aspirations for Africa? And so in coining this so-called African agenda for the GCM, I think it's really important that we hold on to these entry points. Who are the entry points? Who are the influences? Because in young lingo language, we talk about influences. Who are your influences? And yes, we can't talk to all 54 member states on the African continent, but we've got some influences. There's some champion countries. They're championing initiatives and championing actors in there. How do you leverage on that? There's also, I think it's important to look again into how do we utilize the different platforms that are available. And I think platforms such as this, where you invite institutional partners, the UN Migration Network, IOM, and other members of the UN Migration Network, coming together to equip the youth with what they think is important, but you making sure that that agenda is really relevant for young people. And of course, working together with African Non-State Actors Platform, our door is open. We've talked about how we can move a little bit closer, and we're hoping we can already start in Addis through an upcoming GCM-styled talk that we want to bring the youth closer to us, not just to sit with us and engage, but also how do we take it forward in terms of implementing the GCM, but also monitoring it with the eyes of the youth, which will remain very relevant. I'll stop here and open for questions.
Thank you so much, Kari. That was really informative and really well explained. So we will move on to the Q&A session, and we're already receiving a few questions. So I will read out the questions, and either Sophia or Paddy can answer, depending on your area of expertise. So the first question is from Judith from Chad. And the question is, what are the main challenges Chad faces in terms of migration, both for internally displaced persons and for refugees? And also, what policies or strategies are in place to address these challenges? I'm open to either Paddy or Sophia.
Thank you very much, Paddy, to allow me. Thank you very much for the colleague for that very important question. I will I'll tag the IOM Chad website as well as our regional offices website on the chat box for further information. But from our work, Chad, as many countries in our continent, faces significant migration challenges due to both internal displacement as well as the influx of refugees from neighboring countries. In response to that, the government has been working with international organizations such as the IOM, the UNHCR, and others to manage displacement, provide humanitarian aid and other services such as education and healthcare to migrants and refugees. In terms of the policy responses, Chad's policies aim to improve mainly border management and create frameworks to support IDPs and refugees through legal protection while promoting sustainable development to address, root causes of displacement. These strategies reflect, a combination of immediate humanitarian response as well as long-term development goals to basically tackle the irregular aspect of migration issues in the country as well as in the neighboring countries. There are many initiatives beyond the country's national response. It has been part of several migration policy development processes within the continent through the African Union Commission and other sub-regional frameworks. Over to you, Nelson.
Thank you. I will move on to the second question. That's from someone from Kenya. They're asking, there's a vibrant civil society network in Kenya dealing with migration, modern slavery, and counter human trafficking. How can youth in these spaces collaborate with the GCM? I'll again open it up to either of you. And
Paddy?
if you'd like to,
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Sophia. No, I think a very relevant question. And I think what we recognize from the side of the platform is the fact that there's a lot of initiatives and networks that are already at that national level. Implementation of the GCM is happening at the national level. And in fact, it's happening in local communities. And there's a lot of emphasis around the role of local actors. And of course, sometimes when we hear local actors, we're afraid to think about local authorities. But indeed, local actors involves all those who are on the ground, who have a better understanding of the situation, the kind of resources, technical and financial, but also the kind of leveraging that is required to move a situation to the next step. So what kind of transformation are people at that local level looking for? So I would say that the first place to start is to find out what is happening. So what is the link, for instance, that you have from that particular network that the colleague has asked? And how does that tap into, for instance, the national coordination mechanism that is looking at migration issues at a broader space? And these are questions that I would encourage also for you to write to IOM. So for instance, IOM is a coordinator for the GCM. It's vested as a coordinator. So its role is not, we don't go to IOM because it's International Organization for Migration. It's actually been equipped by the United Nations to coordinate member states. And so if the response is not sitting with IOM, they are like a directory. They will lead you to then where it should be happening. But then I think also at the same time, what's important is to key into MYCP, because MYCP seems to just, 2 days ago, I was sitting in Brussels and there was an MYCP member there, and we got talking about, diaspora. And so MYCP, I feel that is this particular group that could also give you a different type of directory, both from a thematic perspective, but also give you global connections and global contacts that are then able to cascade down. Because as we know, for a lot of issues, sometimes you have to address it from top and bottom. You know, you get your contacts from that local level, and when you see the response is not coming, you try and leverage other contact points. So I think investing in making useful contacts is really important for you to be able to elevate a lot of the issues that are happening at that local level, and a lot of the issues that you already are as local actors very much aware of. And what you need is just that push to make sure that there's a spotlight.
That was really I will ask a few questions that are related. So I think maybe Paddy, you might take this. So how can young people directly contribute to the GCM, especially when they feel removed from international policy processes, which also aligns with the two other questions which ask, when Paddy says at national level, do you mean with government and IOM only, or can youth directly contribute to the process? I really hope that was clear.
Yes, for me, the national level is at the national level, yes, of course, it's state-led. So one thing we always have to remember is that the GCM is state-led, but it's not state-driven, or just not states. It's not state-centered, if you like. It has to be a state-led process that is with a migrant-centered approach. And what does that mean? That means that all those who are working around with migrants and those who are advocating for migrants' rights are invited into this space to challenge how the government, to support in terms of conceptualization around the planning of GCM activities, so that first, the IOF is mainly your contact point, because it tells you, actually, this is what we are already doing. These are the different platforms that are available. Maybe there's already a technical working group that a youth organization, and they're looking for youth who would participate. Maybe there is another type of forum within the way that country is set up. But I think Sophia may be able to answer a little bit more to it. But what I also feel from a civil society perspective is that, yes, it is difficult. And I think we also need to realize that sometimes it's difficult because we have a communication barrier. Remember that when you come in from an advocacy point of view, advocacy has been born out of activism. So governments sometimes resist because they think you are there to fight. So I think it's also very important that you have enough information about what is the process, what are the elements that you would like to bring. So there's a lot of clarity, even as you present, and that it's done in a progressive way, and it's done in a constructive way. How are we here to support you? But one last point I would make is also by applying for different funding. So for instance, unfortunately, it closed, but there was an application that was put out for anybody who's working around civil society to come and participate at the GCM. I filled out the form as much as Nelson filled out the form. So seeing yourself also as an equal, that you are a youth organization, but as an equal with other civil society organizations is very important, because youth is just a part of you. We were all young before, and we will transition to other things. But youth civil society organizations are really critical. And sometimes I see them being torn apart and distinct, and yet they are critical elements for civil society to leverage
on. Thank you, Paddy. Sophia, I think you had an intervention.
Thank you very much, Nelson. It's always very difficult to say anything after Paddy because she speaks very eloquently, you know. But yes, just to emphasize on some of the points that you mentioned, Paddy, for the colleague from Kenya, particularly, for example, as you mentioned, Kenya has one of the very strong national coordination mechanisms that is led by the government of Kenya, and works with different several. So the national coordination mechanism is basically, it brings together, as you know, migration does not necessarily fall under one ministry only. So what we've noticed even before the adoption of the GCM as IOM was, communication was very fragmented. It's always very difficult, to bring everyone in a government on the same table. One ministry has a different policy that may not necessarily speak to what the other ministry is putting out when it comes to migration issues. So it's within that context, and with the support of IGAD and the African Union Commission, that countries in the IGAD region, especially particularly, they form these national coordination mechanisms. Basically, a secretariat is housed in a certain ministry that coordinates all of the work for that government. So within those national coordination mechanisms, there is space for stakeholders. As you all know, the GCM is all about whole of government as well as whole of society approach. We know it's not a picture perfect out there. As Paddy said, sometimes information is out there. For example, what she just mentioned for the GCM stakeholders application, it was on the website. CSOs, youth group, different stakeholders that are accredited under the AUC ECOSOC were also, invitations were also basically, it was an open invitation. It was posted on the website, but as I said, it's not picture perfect out there. But it's really important to follow some of the communication also that comes from the country offices of IOM, not necessarily only IOM, but also other agencies who are working on migration and mobility issues in the different countries. Thank you. Over to you, Nelson.
Thank you, Sophia. So we don't really have much time, so I'll take one more question from there's a raised hand, so Slamin Diva. I realize most people are asking very specific questions that are specific to their region. So others are asking, what are these partnerships doing about flood-related IPDs, and what are the plans for reintegration and structurally sustainable camps? So I think we'll let in Lamin. Then we'll allow Sophia and Paddy to probably answer those two questions.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me. It's very important. I think the second speaker did mention that what are some of the things that we need to do in order to, change some of this narrative and equally engage so many people, because right now that we already identify some of our problems, how do we tackle them, or how do we try to combat some of those issues that are really affecting us? And again, how many countries are we talking about that currently we have a part of it? If not, then maybe I will definitely encourage us to have one in the Gambia here, because it's very important and it's a great initiative. I think this will definitely help, yeah. So for now, I can just leave it at that. Not, yeah.
Thank you, Lamin. So,
you're welcome.
Paddy?
Lamin, you're from a champion country. I remember that. I forgot the Gambia. And so, I think that this is, the accountability part. The youth are always good in making us very accountable. And I think often, I guess we have seen it ourselves with our parents, and now we're seeing it for those of us with children, are seeing it with our own children, how accountable they want us to be. And so sometimes I forget that even in this very nature, this human nature of asking for accountability, that's the same nature that we use, of course, tailored and learned with understanding what is the expectation, what was the expectation out of a particular framework, what is the expectation of a champion country, what are those things that they have put forward as a champion country that will move along. And I mean, it kind of also relates a bit to the question that's been asked in the chat about emerging trends in youth migration. I mean, if you look at what comes out on the news, it shows as though the whole African continent is leaving. But the truth of the matter is that many stay. And so if many are staying, what are we doing? Both those who are on the continent and off the continent. I'm at a diaspora meeting right now. What is our best foot forward, apart from when we look at our governments, in terms of ensuring that more can stay and have access to decent work? Because we know that if we leave this into the hands of government, even if some of our governments were given so much resources, the problems are overwhelming. And so I think it's also about us putting our best step forward in terms of asking for accountability. And I think we will have that opportunity when we talk more and more around the monitoring of the GCM, which is why we bring it down again to the people. How do you, what does the GCM mean for the youth? And for the African youth, what does the GCM mean for you? And therefore, can you build the monitoring out of what the GCM means for you? And yes, there may be a standalone monitoring, there'll be prioritization by different countries. How do you manage to inject all of that into these different forums and meetings? Somebody said, yeah, but we're never invited sometimes to in-person conferences. And that is true. And that is a limitation that we see. We see a shrinking space. And yes, we have the opportunity to be virtual. And sometimes it works. Like now, I'm really glad I could be here. I'm not sure how MYCP would manage to bring all of us in a particular space. But indeed, there are pivotal moments when we must have people in the room. So as much as we can, I think that's why we need to work across platforms for us to leverage that space and ensure we have youth voices. And you also make us the sort of post-youth to be accountable to ensuring that we have youth in our panels, in our engagement, in everything that we do. Because I think it can be easy for us to talk about the message for other people and less when it's also about ourselves. So practicing also what we're preaching, I think, remains very important. But I think the issue that we really need to touch on is youth migration. And it's both the regular and irregular. In 2 days' time, actually tomorrow, the Kenyan president and authorities within Germany will be signing a labor migration agreement that will talk about migration between Kenya and Germany. This is not just important for Kenyans and German and people living in Germany. This is important also for the rest of Africa to look at what is in that agreement. What does it say? But it's most importantly for the youth because it talks about, for instance, vocational training and the options. What does that look like? It talks about skills for Germany. But have we stopped to ask ourselves, are these the skills that will be essential for Africa? It talks about returns, but have we talked about how we're going to reintegrate people, not just by the programs that happen that are facilitated by different actors within the UN system and outside the UN system? What opportunities are really there for people to engage in decent work? So now we're really happy. So for instance, for a long time, we have been pushing for legal pathways to be part and parcel of the conversation with diaspora engagement. Because before you become a diaspora, you must be a migrant. And before you become a migrant that can support to sustainable development, you must have decent work. So these things are now going more hand in hand. We've seen now IOM has launched, I think is even looking at a high-level event when we come to the GCM. What role? Right to Mon Ami, what role will the youth play in that side event as direct as that, right? Which young people are going to be part of this conversation with Director General Amy Pope when we're talking about legal pathways? Do we push enough? So that's also important in terms of that. And I think I can stop here because I think there's many points that can be raised. And there are many places that indeed we could look at how we can really enhance and empower African youth, not just for the GCM on advocacy, but a GCM that implements what is meaningful for us on the ground.
Thank you very much. I think that have answered my question. Hence, we all know migration is a natural phenomenon, and even other birds and other animals, lower animals in the bush do migrate. So, I mean, it's important that you dwell more into that, and I mean, how the two are connected, because even those in the diaspora, you cannot be a diaspora without being a migrant. You first migrate and later, I mean, settle down. So, I mean, and the point where you talk about the Kenyan president, I mean, his intervention with that of the German government, I think that's a very important point, you know, because if one country is affected in Africa, I mean, the whole Africa is affected. As Kwame Nkrumah said, if Ghana is got its independence without, I mean, other African countries get its independence is meaningless. So that's what I believe on. That sense of Pan-Africanism is what we need to foresee. I mean, not only to be thinking about nationalism, you know, so it's very important, you know, and while you're talking about climate change, I think that's one of the most important aspects. In fact, to me, these two are all connected together. I think you're from Kenya, right? You've been
A bit
talking
south. I'm from Zambia.
Zambia. Okay, it's like you've been talking more about Kenya. Where I went to attend the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice from Chuka University. So, I
Thank you
mean,
so much,
on
Ryan.
yeah, exactly.
Really engaging. So we'll allow Sophia to intervene. Thank you so much, Lauren, and Buddy, that was
Yeah,
very
Safia can intervene on that. Yeah. Mm.
thank you, Sophia. Thank you.
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you
Those
very much. Yeah. So no, just to highlight that for the purposes of the discussion today, since it's revolving around the GCM, as you might know, the GCM primarily focuses on international migration rather than internal displacement. There are other frameworks that mainly concentrate on internal displacement, including some that are already mentioned on due to flood and other related causes that mainly focus on internal IDPs basically. However, it doesn't mean it's 100% silent, through the emphasis on addressing the root causes of migration and displacement and ensuring protection for vulnerable populations, it indirectly touches upon, but primarily the GCM focuses on international migration. So if there are going to be other platforms, to discuss about other frameworks dealing on internal displacement, I think we can have further discussion on that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Nelson.
Thank you, Sophia. So that will bring us to the close of the expert panel, but I know there's a lot of questions coming in. We have another session on roundtable, so if you have comments and thoughts, you're really welcome to also share that in the next session. Thank you so much. This has been very informative and very powerful and engaging. So thank you to Sophia and Buddy. So I'll hand over to Aryan for the next session.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Paddy, for your time and all of your great comments and thoughts and reflections. They're so helpful and great for us to help all the participants learn more as we move into the next part of today's session, which is the breakout rooms. So we'll now be opening the breakout rooms. There are 2 breakout rooms in English and 1 breakout room in French. Once they're open, you are free to choose whichever one you feel most comfortable talking in. Like I said at the beginning, they are the same. And it's really your chance to now feed into the process and feed into the GCM review that is coming up next month by answering the questions by our facilitators, who are just there to support the conversation and encourage you to speak as well. So I'll open those now and we'll see you back here in about half an hour. So please feel free to press the breakout room button and join a breakout room. You might be moved around if you are not in the French room, just for numbers reasons, but like I said, they are the same. And if you would like to join the French breakout room, please join breakout room 3. You are more than welcome to stay and observe as well and just watch the conversation as well.
Yeah, can you kindly move me to a break room, please?
Yes, if you do need to be moved, just give me a shout.
Okay. Okay.
If there are any French speakers parlez français, please tell me and I can move you to roundtable 3.
Okay, can you move me to round 3
Yes.
for French speakers?
Si vous parlez français, donnez-moi votre nom. Thank you, Paddy. Please feel free. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Teşekkür.
Hey, sorry, is this a French breakout?
No, this is not. This is just a waiting space. But if you would like to go to the French breakout room, please let me know and I can move you there. If you'd like to go to an English one, I can also move you to that room as well.
Yes, I need to be in the English room.
Yes, Bahati. If you would like to go to the English breakout room, please let me know. You can also move yourself once you're in the room. Maureen. No worries. If you would like to not take part in the breakout room discussion, that's completely fine. Please do let me know if you would like to be moved to a room. Oh, hello. Si vous parlez français, s'il vous plaît, donnez-moi votre nom.
Hi, Ariane.
Please, can you once again display the question so that we can understand it again, please?
Awesome. Ariane, can I have screen sharing ability? Is that possible?
You should be able to.
It seems like I'm unable to share my screen, so I will just send the question in the chat again. So the question is, what are some successful examples of youth-led initiatives supporting advocacy on migration and displacement?
Okay, I don't know if this is good afternoon or because it's afternoon here, we are in Kenya. Swamuranga in Kenya. And concerning this question, I think this is personally, I don't have an experience where a certain youth led initiative has been advocating for the migration. I don't have this experience so far. I think as long as we are youth engaged in different advocacy, this is the opportunity that we are having. The GCM is bringing to us. I think you are opening the doors for us so that this advocacy, we can find the right ways to advocate for this. Personally, I don't have any experience where a youth-led initiative has been advocating for this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll just be taking notes while everyone is speaking, so thank you so much. I think somebody else had their hand raised. Maranka, go ahead. Oh, Bahati.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Secondly, I think if in our context, in our areas, if we have not been able to have youth-led initiative advocating for migration displacement, because this topic has been taken with a lot of sensitivities. So I am talking here from the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where this topic concerning the migration and displacement is a topic reserved only for very, very high agencies like IM, UNHCR, and Refugee Point. So we have few organizations and very, very big organizations who only deal with this matter. So once an individual wants to engage in
parce que dans mon cas là, j'étais membre d'une initiative où j'ai subi un mentoring pour 4 mois concernant les questions qui sont relatives au changement climatique et les réfugiés, surtout dans la région du Suana, l'Afrique et de l'Afrique. Là, on a travaillé aussi sur renforcer les capacités des jeunes en question qui sont relatives et comment ils peuvent gérer les réfugiés, comment on peut donner des aides ou comment on peut avoir un financement par des organisations internationales. Notre travail était plutôt de la recherche. On a pu faire des policy briefs sur ces questions qui va être bientôt publié sur notre site. Je crois que c'est qu'on a pu un peu renforcer les capacités, on a pu créer des initiatives au niveau local. Je crois que c'est tout pour maintenant.
Merci Selma. Et est-ce que vous pouvez répéter parce que je n'ai pas suivi, c'était comment s'appelait cette initiative, ce projet qui a été dans votre village? Je n'ai pas suivi.
C'est une organisation, je peux dire que c'est une ONG qui est internationale qui s'appelle Climate Series. C'est pour tous les Africains et pour les Africains et pour les Arabes. Et aussi pour les gens de l'Asie.
D'accord, merci. Et c'était au niveau local, c'est ça?
Oui.
D'accord,
C'est au niveau.
parfait.
Mais c'est aussi pour reconnaître des gens qui partagent le même destin, qui partagent les mêmes problèmes qui sont relatifs aux réfugiés avec d'autres États. Donc, c'est pour coopérer. Alors, merci à vous.
Merci Selma, c'est exactement ce qu'on cherche ici et je vois que Narcisse, François, à vous la parole.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Le nôtre ici au Sud-Soudan, nous, les jeunes réfugiés au Sud-Soudan, on avait des difficultés à voyager, spécialement en tant que réfugiés. Pour quitter le pays, ce n'était pas facile pour nous. Et on était assis en tant que jeunes réfugiés. On a écrit une lettre au gouvernement et le HCR, y compris celui qu'on appelle le CIARE, qui regarde sur les réfugiés, pour demander à nous faire un papier de voyage qui peut nous permettre aussi d'avoir accès à sortir, à atteindre certaines formations ou bien des bourses d'études ou bien au cas de santé, parce qu'on voyait que quand il y a quelqu'un a des problèmes, on ne peut pas le faire voyager parce qu'il n'y a pas un passeport qui...
It's more focused on specifically migrants through maybe who are suffering from conflict and other issues, but climate migrants are having problem crossing, having free border movement because the GCM has not really captured climate mobility. So it's one of the challenges personally that we feel that the GCM moving forward during these consultation processes would be able to capture that. So thank you very much for your time and your audience.
Thank you very much. I think we're on time to move to the second question. Remember, the second question, we will be discussing some key challenges related to the GCM. So we will be moving forward to each one of them. So I will say to you all of them. So in case you want to separate apart your hand for a specific one, you can do it and you don't miss a chance to speak. So the challenges that we will be discussing, and we can do, of course, a policy recommendation for decision makers, are trafficking, human trafficking, education, climate mobility. So I think that will be focus what we just have heard, labor exploitation, and migrants' rights and protection. So we will be roughly 3 minutes per thematic. So it's not necessary to get through all of them. So if you want to start for a specific one, you can do it. So regarding climate mobility, as far as we can listen, like we can talk about this figure about the climate migrant who is not already established. So maybe now the conversation is around any other topics.
Most of the African partners or countries, they have very good policies. But
I think you're cutting out a little bit.
In Cameroon, for instance, we have a plethora of policies or to take up migration patterns. I want to let you know that I will not get you. All right, I'm going to end here because of time, if that's what you mean.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think you were just cutting out a little bit, but I see we have quite a few hands up. I'm going to pass so I guess I'm gonna pass the table to the 4 people that are on the screen. If you could keep your answers very, very short, because we need to move on to question 2 as well. But Tamsir, Abdul, and Darius, if you'd like to just give very quick answers, that would be awesome. And then we have to move on to question 2.
Yeah, thank you very much, Iman. Good afternoon from the Netherlands. So yeah, quickly based on the question, I will just be brief about some of the advocacy that we've done so far. I will start from Yongo, being part of the migration working group. We've been advocating for policy also and some campaigns about migration, especially for young people involved. We have to make sure, like, driving policies and initiatives that focus on the intersection of climate change and migration by advocating for inclusivity in policy discourse and promoting solutions that really prioritize youth voices. As a member of the Joint Council on Welfare of Migrants, is a non-profit organization based in the UK. I'm part of the steering committee on climate change. So we trying to focus and also bring in policies that actually have direct impact on migrants, especially those in the UK right now, because we feel like, especially with this issue of this far right and the riots that happened the last time. So we're trying to have a focused discussion and also some policy formulation in regards to some of the priority areas where as migrants and refugees' rights can be protected, whereas some of those position papers will be submitted to the members of parliament. So we're trying to see how best we can also mobilize with people within the parliament to have their expert opinions on some of this issues, whereas it can be tabled in the parliament. So last year I participated in the Global Youth Migration Forum that took place in Geneva, but it was a hybrid event. I joined virtually, whereas I was part of the people who took part in the position paper for the African group, whereas we discussed on some priority areas like Africans, especially those from the global south in general, some of the problems and issues that they face in terms of migration and displacement. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So actually, I'm super sorry, Abdul and Darius. I do want to hear from you, but I'm just going to move on to the second question for now, just so we can get a chance to hear on some of these like important discussions. I'm just going to copy and paste the question into the chat. Okay, so it's a little bit of a lengthy question, but essentially it's focusing on some key challenges and policy recommendations for decision makers on trafficking in persons, education, climate mobility, labor exploitation, migrants' rights and protection. So I think I've posted all of the thematic areas below. Feel free to comment on any of them, and I'll just be taking notes.
La société africaine, de façon générale, et en République du Bénin, surtout dans le Nord, est beaucoup plus une communauté qui vit de l'agro-pastoralisme, c'est-à-dire il y a l'agriculture et l'élevage qui constituent les activités les plus phares. Alors, si les pluies viennent détruire les champs et le bétail, alors la population n'a autre solution que de migrer vers d'autres endroits où ils auront beaucoup plus de terres arables. Donc, pour ce volet, ce que nous sommes en train de faire actuellement, qui a déjà commencé, on n'a pas encore fini, c'est de contacter, de discuter, de dialoguer avec les leaders religieux traditionnels pour voir quand même en matière de savoirs locaux, savoirs endogènes traditionnels, ce qui se fait depuis les années antérieures, qu'on peut maintenant éventuellement ajouter à ce qui existe sur le terrain en matière de modernité, technicité, pour pouvoir quand même répondre au phénomène du changement climatique. Parce que la société africaine a des connaissances depuis des décennies en matière d'inondation, comment répondre efficacement au phénomène du changement climatique. Alors, nous sommes en train de faire un travail dans ce sens-là à l'heure actuelle. Et ceci, une partie a abouti à ce que nous avons appelé Green Entrepreneurship for Migrants and Refugees. C'est entreprendre mais dans le domaine vert, dans le domaine de l'entrepreneuriat vert pour les migrants et les réfugiés, pour lequel nous sommes en train de courir pour chercher un financement, mais on n'a pas encore obtenu. Donc voilà ce que moi je pourrais dire. Donc les travaux continuent sur le terrain. Voilà.
Merci, merci. Et vous avez même évoqué la deuxième question. C'est quelque chose de très important pour nous parce que vous avez parlé de deux façons en fait de regarder cette question, de traiter cette question des enjeux migratoires et aussi de parler un petit peu, de partager votre projet et de partager votre grille Entrepreneurship for Migrants and Refugees, qu'on appelle des Green Jobs en anglais. Et c'est quelque chose de très important, surtout si on va lier les choses si on va regarder la mobilité climatique surtout. Donc, merci. Et maintenant, je vous invite aussi à regarder la deuxième question. On a un peu traité déjà, qui est bien parce qu'on n'a pas beaucoup de temps. Mais j'invite à Michel de prendre la parole et de vous présenter un petit peu parce que avant, je m'excuse, mais je ne vous ai pas vu que vous avez rejoint la salle. Mais si vous avez vous présenter un petit peu avant de prendre la parole, je vous invite à faire ça maintenant.
Ok. Bonjour à tous. Je suis Michel Vendieu. Je suis de nationalité camerounaise. Et puis, je fais partie du groupe de recherche action travaillant sur la migration en Afrique centrale. Donc, nous travaillons basé au Cameroun. Donc, je travaille un peu avec les déplacés internes.
African region. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Glory, for what you have said. I think this topic about online exploitation is something that maybe they are not taking into consideration, but it's a really part of it and more in this online and tech world. Could you please emphasize a little bit more about online exploitation because it's the first time I heard about it, and I would like to know a little bit more about how it's working.
Thank you. So we'll speak in the context of what we do. We mostly handle human trafficking cases, but when it comes to online related cases, investigations that are related to online exploitation cases, we do have specific, for now, government agencies that usually handle these cases because they are transnational in nature. That means that we can't be able to address these issues ourselves because we don't have, the right resources to be able to, do rescues or prosecution of these kinds of cases. However, we do a lot of referrals. So for us, we do rescuing, whether it's cases that are in Gulf countries or cases within the African region or wherever a person is around the world, we do receive cases and we're able to refer. So we also receive cases of online exploitation, and this includes exploitation, especially of children. We mostly do online child sexual exploitation and abuse cases, where generally just a child is lured in by online traffickers into, either they are lured through social media, whether it's their parents' social media or maybe through games or whatever it is, whatever social platform that the child is linked in. And this also happens with adults when it comes to, issues of job, like our colleague has spoken about. When you see a job application and you try to apply, there's also issues of, you've met someone on social media and you've talked for a while, and now you feel comfortable and you want to go see them, and therefore you end up, traveling across the country or across countries to go see this person, and then this person is non-existent. We have a lot of these cases, but they come in very, very many different forms, and therefore we are able to deal with them as they come. As I mentioned, there are emerging issues, so we can only take in a case as it comes, but each case is special. But just the tech facilitated bit of exploitation is there for both adults and children. Yeah.
Perfect, Lori. Really good. I think I will close with this. This last sentence you have said, the tech.
Yes, I'm coming again from Tanzania, and maybe from my context in Tanzania, and of course in Tanzania we still have challenges regarding to migration issues, and especially those forced to move from their origin locations. And maybe I will bring my my input from the refugee context protections. Of course, here in Tanzania, we are hosting mostly Congolese and the Burundians, and some few from Lebanon, Eritrea. And for my case from Burundians and Congolese refugees, of course, they are facing a lot of challenges, including the stigmatization of the community, and sometimes they are being denied from their migrant rights, and some they are lacking some documents, including travel documents, because you might find some they have talents, maybe they want to travel to another countries, but because of their status, sometimes it's not easy for them to access such documentations or travel documents. But also the big issue is the narrative, the public awareness on about refugee issues, because sometimes the policies itself, they're like exploitative. The policies and the laws and the legislation that we have, that seems to be exploitative to refugees. So even the public, sometimes they use the existing laws to exploit refugees in accessing some services. So in the part of advocacy, it's quite a bit currently. Some actors that are engaging in policy dialogues, like to negotiate with the government, to push and to pressurize on policy reforms so that they can give chances to refugees. So I think maybe my recommendation on the matters, we need to add more efforts in policy dialogues and research, evidence-based research, so that the actors and the key stakeholders has to understand and see the need to change the legal frameworks and policies. Thank you.
Amazing, and I'll just pass it off to you. I know you're from Cameroon. I think your name, I didn't get your name exactly, but University Bue. You can just go ahead. We have like a minute left.
All right, can you get me? Sorry, yep. I have to turn off my video because of connection challenge. So my name is Bate Allen. I'm from the Southwest region of Cameroon. Currently, we are having the Anglophone crisis, and so there's a lot of displacement for about 7 years today. I happen to work with a lot of migrant communities, especially from DRC, Congo, South Sudan, Nigeria, who came to Cameroon. And we did a couple of AGD. AGD is the Gender and Diversity Program with the refugees and the IDPs. And we realized that among the top challenges that they faced, they outlined the challenge of civil documentation, language, and health challenge as the top most important challenges that they need immediate attention. And they also outlined the issue of civil status documentation as the priority. The reason is because majority of the migrant population are always on the move. And they are always on the move because the policies within a particular zone are kind of repellent to them and deterrent for their progress. And oftentimes, for them to attain these documentations, they need to bribe, they need to, go through the corrupt system that is in place. And as such, they want to always go back to the place of origin. So as a result of this, I think that a lot will go back on what I said before, policy implementation. There are policies in place for migration flows and patterns, but majority of them are not working. Forget about what Kenyan president wants to go and do in Germany. let's look at it in 4 years to come. You realize that it is not in place. So I think it's in policy. Sorry.
No, I'm so sorry, but the breakout room's closing in 4 seconds. So sorry. Thank you so much, everyone.
Actually given a more elaborate way of dealing with such. I think those recommendations having taken into account would really help us deal with the issue
Sorry,
of
Carly. Sorry, we are in the main room again. Thank you very much. I was so excited what you have saying. So you can end writing to me in the group chat, in the chat. So I will put it in our conversation. Hello, everyone. I hope you had great conversations. The discussion in our breakout room was super excited and interesting. So I hope you had the same. So I think now we will have a small space to share some thoughts. To you, Ariane.
Perfect. Thank you, Josefina. And apologies if I cut you off speaking. I think I did that in almost every room. So apologies in advance. But just for time, we don't want to go too much over than we already are. But thank you so much, everyone, for those interesting discussions. I was going around and they were so good. And we loved hearing all of them. Like Francesca has put in the chat, if you would like to send us any more of your thoughts, opinions, please do email migrationgfp@unmgcy.org, and we can include them in our summary report of this session, which we'll send to all of you alongside the roundtable notes. Very briefly, because we do not have time for sharing success stories, unfortunately, but would Iman, Josefina, or Francesca like to briefly summarize in about 1 minute each any key takeaways from each of your breakout rooms? Maybe Iman, over to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ariane, and thank you so much for having me. I think a really big I guess like theme that we had in our breakout room was highlighting the challenges that migrants face, whether that be lack of access to healthcare, documentation on their journey as migrants to their final destination. I think a lot of it was just like education about like the circumstances that they're in and how to access the basic rights that they don't necessarily know that they have access to, perhaps, as well as really making sure that migrants are included in policy discussions, youth are included in policy discussions to make sure that their voices are being heard in those spaces. But yeah, that's a very short summary that I have.
Thank you, Iman. Francesca, over to you. Feel free to do it in French for French speakers.
I can also translate for the rest of the room, but essentially we talked about the different issues that are faced, especially by refugees, not only in terms of accessing rights and their needs, but also these are the same issues that hinder them from participating in relevant spaces and bringing this up and bringing up their advocacy, especially for organizations. We also talked about displacement, not only in terms of international within the region, but also internal, and especially in urban areas, and the different precarious situations that this puts people in this situation, but also the specific members of the population that are at risk and further complicated by certain aspects. So, for example, young girls who are already in refugee camps. In terms of recommendations, there was something that was really important that was brought up, and it was the depoliticization of the problems in the region, because the studies exist, recommendations exist, and solutions exist, but the question is now how to put that in practice, and how to get the leaders to listen, and also how to elect good leaders that are actually going to listen to the rest of the population.
Thank you, Francesca, and merci for all of the French speakers. Josefina, over to you.
Okay, everyone, we talk about, basically, we have some good examples about youth-led organizations in Kenya, in Ghana, and what we talk about at the end of the session is like this intersection between human traffic, labor migration. And what we figure out and we found out is really good examples about that online exploitation and technology is facilitating human trafficking. Most of the cases because people are trapped in faked job applications. So technology is facilitating the human trafficking and in this intersection with job applications and unemployment. Of course, a lot of young people who don't have experience about workflows and employment and need a job and are under poverty are facing these issues. They start talking with someone, they feel confident, be online, and then finally they are in that route. Another way of doing it, it's about children. We know that children are most of the time in social media playing games. It's the same way that they start feeling comfortable talking with someone. So at the end, what we were talking is that if technology is facilitating human trafficking, technology will be a good way to start avoiding it by monitoring it and finding trafficking patterns in social media. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josefina, Iman, and Francesca for all of those reflections. And thank you to all of you who are here today for giving those reflections with us. And please rest assured we will include them as best we can at the GCM Regional Review upcoming at the 8th to the 10th of October next month. And our regional focal point, Rose Kobisinge, will be hopefully representing us there. I'm now going to turn to Nelson to provide some exciting next steps, which you can all get involved with as well, and introduce our GCM Youth Consultations project. So Nelson, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Arian. I want to thank every contributor and all the participants today. I'm sure we've learned a lot, and I know I have. And I think one lesson you have is I've learned from all these sessions that there's an issue of tokenization of young people, and we would like to be more engaged and more involved in migration issues and also share experiences, share solutions through your lived experiences. So I wish this was longer because we'd have collected more information and more perspectives from you people, but I believe that we have more sessions are coming up. As Arian has mentioned that MYCP is running a regional consultation to support the International Migration Review Forum for 2026 and also the regional forums that have been run this year. So MYCP will be reaching out to you people, to everybody across the African continent to collect ideas and perspectives and solutions. And we'd really love to have you people, everyone to be engaged with us. So one of the things I'll share my email. So if any group, any individual would like to collaborate with us during these consultations, because this was not long enough for us to collect as much as we would. So I'll share my email in the chat box as I have. Sorry, my email is there. There's a mistake on the email. And then you can reach out to me, and we will continue this in the consultation that will start from this month towards the end or towards June next year. So I really look forward to reaching out to everyone and to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nelson, for letting us know about the consultations. The final thing we would love from all of you here today is a bit of feedback about the session now having come to an end, about what you learned, what you took away, any feedback that you have for us. As we said, we'll be running these across the continent and across all of the continents around the world. So there'll be ones for Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific. Africa is the first, given, like Paddy said, it's the most youthful continent, so we wanted to start with you. So please do let us know your thoughts and opinions. So I will launch that poll now. Please do feel free to input your thoughts. It's very quick, just on a rating scale and any feedback. And the final thing for us to do today will take a last little quick photo once the poll closes. So if there are any responses to the poll, please do so now. That'd be lovely.
There are only 2 questions, not 3.
There should be 8 questions total. So maybe if you might have to scroll if you're on your device or on your phone, and you feel free to answer any. And they're all anonymous, so we won't see anything as well. So please do feel free to answer truthfully, and that would really help us to know a bit more. I'll keep it open for another 30-ish seconds before we close it and take the final photo to say goodbye. Last 5 seconds if anyone wants to complete the form. That would be really, really helpful.
Hi everyone, my name is Walter from Uganda, Kampala. This is my first time to join this convention, and I've learned a few stuff, and looking forward to, being part of this great team. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Walter. Thank you for joining. We're so happy to have you. And thank you, everyone. I'm going to close the poll now. So if you have any other last second additions,
Yeah.
Arian, aren't you leaving your email, Arian?
Yes. So if you would like to reach out, please do reach out to migrationgfp@unmgcy.org. And if you would like to reach out to Nelson around the Africa Youth Consultations, Nelson, if you want to just put your email in the chat once again.
Okay.
I would request maybe you can you share the email on the message line, something like that would be so helpful. Okay, I don't know.
There'll be an email sent out to all of you afterwards from the session where you can then add any comments and things. But the final thing.
What I'm saying is it possible to have some of these the presentation and lectures sent to our emails, if that's okay with you?
Yes, of course. We'll send you the recordings and the presentation from Monami.
Please
But if
do.
everyone wants to turn on their camera, if you feel comfortable, of course, no pressure, to do a very quick photo. We would love to do a photo for our social media to show all of you here today. So please feel free to turn the camera on.
Right.
So lovely to see all of your faces. And
My video has been stopped. I don't know if maybe administrator, something like that.
No worries. Great. So I'm going to take the photo now. I'm going to hide the captions as well. So everyone with your largest smile, thank you so much.
Yeah.
2, 1.
Oh.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. It was lovely to see
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
That marks the end of our capacity building session, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Wish you same. Thank you so much. Bye.